Hello everyone. We would like to welcome you to the first webinar of our monthly series, Raising the Bar, a closer look at our measure on intellectual engagement. Our presenters today are Dr. Kathleen Hughes, researcher at the Learning Bar, who will be sharing what research tells us about intellectual engagement. Next up is myself, Stephanie Robinson, account success manager at the Learning Bar. I will be discussing how to accurately measure intellectual engagement in a school setting. And finally, we will listen in to a presentation by Olga Grigoriev, a Tell Them For Me member who successfully raised the bar at her school in regards to intellectual engagement.
Good afternoon. I'm your first speaker, Dr. Kathleen Hughes. I specialize in studying student engagement, particularly among shy and socially anxious students, and I'm going to give you a brief research overview of intellectual engagement. When we talk about student engagement, we could be talking about a number of different things, as engagement is a very complex idea. If students feel as though they belong and fit in at school, and have meaningful connections at school, they are considered to be socially engaged. If students regularly attend class, do their homework, and believe school is important, they can be considered institutionally engaged. Finally, if students pay attention in class, try hard at activities, and feel interested and motivated towards learning, then they can be considered intellectually engaged. It is this intellectual engagement that has been linked with important school and developmental outcomes, and is our focus today. How can you tell if students are intellectually engaged in school? They are the students that are not bored. Instead, they have their heads up, their eyes forward, focusing on current classroom activity. They are the students who work steadily on assignments at their seat until they are finished. They are the students who respond to questions in class, get excited over course material, and show enthusiasm for learning. Finally, they are the students who are neither understimulated nor overstimulated in the classroom. They are being challenged appropriately for their current level of skill. Having students who are intellectually engaged is a wonderful thing. Canadian educational researchers have found that students who are more engaged in school are more likely to stay on task, complete assignments, learn from activities, improve their skills, and master course material. So, students who are more intellectually engaged in school are more likely to achieve and perform well in school. But that's not all. Students who are more engaged in school tend to feel more positive about themselves and have more self-confidence. When course material gets tough and students struggle, the ones that are more engaged tend to persist, hang in there, and push through. Being intellectually engaged also helps to boost self-esteem and may protect students from negative outcomes, such as depression and anxiety. Students who are engaged are also less likely to display delinquent behavior, to use illicit substances, or to become a teenage parent. When we consider the long-term effects, we know that intellectual engagement in early elementary is tied to high school completion rates. Middle school and high school engagement has been linked with graduation and post-secondary enrollment. Now, although intellectual engagement is linked with long-term outcomes, this does not imply that engagement is unchangeable. Research has shown that engagement levels can fluctuate and change over time if students are exposed to the right factors. In fact, we know that some school jurisdictions using the Tell Them For Me survey have been able to increase the level of engagement within their schools by 20 and even 30% in just one school year. Later on, we are going to hear from a school district that has done just that. In terms of the research literature, we know there are many things which may influence levels of intellectual engagement. Some of these things are beyond a school district's control, like gender and family socioeconomic status. We know that girls are more likely to be engaged, and that children from middle class or upper middle class families are more likely to be engaged. But there are some family factors that school districts can influence, such as parental involvement. It is possible for school districts to reach out and encourage parents to become more involved with their children's education, whether through volunteer opportunities, feedback on students' performance, or parental workshops. Also, there are many school factors that influence and impact intellectual engagement. We're going to focus on 3 of these factors now. First, there are the relationships that students form in school, both with their peers or classmates and with their teacher. Social developmental research has found that students who form negative relationships at school, such as being excluded or rejected by their peers, or having a conflicted relationship with their teacher, are more likely to disengage from school. In comparison, students who have a strong, positive connection with their teacher are more likely to value school and to put more effort into their learning. Therefore, one possible strategy for schools to increase intellectual engagement is to prioritize fostering positive relationships between teachers and students, and encouraging cooperation and communication among students. Second, the quality of instruction and the types of activities that students do in class can impact engagement. If lesson plans are interactive, captivating, and relatable to students' everyday lives, they'll be more inclined to pay attention. Also, if course content is delivered in a way that reflects students' mental processes, students will learn better. Cognitive psychology researchers suggest that complex and challenging activities could be broken up into chunks to provide age-appropriate cognitive breaks. New ideas and concepts could be taught in groups or clusters so that it will not be overwhelming for students. But at the same time, course content should be challenging enough that it is not dull, repetitive, or understimulating. One possible way for schools to increase intellectual engagement is to rethink how to view teaching and learning in school, to introduce more dynamic, interactive learning approaches to help students become active members of the classroom. In addition, providing opportunities to connect lesson plans with real-life applications can enhance students' interest and motivation to learn. Finally, ensuring that material is delivered in an accessible, age-appropriate way will give students the ideal level of challenge in the classroom. Third and finally, the school learning environment, or the classroom climate, matters. The socio-emotional quality of a classroom perhaps plays the largest role in terms of the school factors that influence intellectual engagement. A positive classroom climate may refer to a classroom that is well structured and makes expectations clear. Students understand what they are required to do and what they should do if they need assistance. Classrooms like this are reliable and stable. A positive classroom climate may also refer to a classroom that is organized and has smooth transitions between activities. There is minimal chaos in these classrooms. Lesson plans are well thought out, with later lessons building upon earlier ones. Multiple classes may focus on certain themes to bring continuity to students' learning. A positive classroom climate may also refer to a classroom in which students have a voice, a vote, and a sense of autonomy. In these classrooms, students have a say over what they can study or focus on, whether it be the books they read, a topic they choose for their essays, or the order they cover certain special topics in class. Finally, a positive classroom climate is a learning environment that feels welcoming, supportive, and friendly. A place where students feel encouraged to participate and where they do not worry about being harassed, teased, or criticized for not knowing an answer or for making a mistake. There are many things the schools can do to improve classroom climate, including whole school strategies, such as encouraging students to become more supportive of one another, soliciting student feedback and input so that they feel they have a voice, and recruiting students to take responsibility for tasks which help to improve class organization and minimize chaos, such as asking students to help take attendance, with setting up lab equipment, or with organizing supplies. All of these school factors matter. Positive relationships, quality instruction, and classroom climate matter, and all have been shown to boost intellectual engagement in general. However, some of these school factors matter even more for certain subpopulations of students. In particular, some of my recent research has found that having a positive classroom climate may be especially beneficial for shy, socially withdrawn, or socially anxious students. These students are typically very nervous and fearful towards evaluations and judgments of others. Having a supportive and warm classroom climate may help these students to feel more comfortable in school, which helps them to overcome their feelings of anxiety so that they can intellectually engage. Another example is with students who display overt aggression, hostility, or conduct problems in school. Students who act out aggressively typically do so as a coping strategy for dealing with stress and frustration. As a consequence, these students tend to have poorer relationships at school. Therefore, these students typically benefit most from coping strategies and social skills training, which helps them to stay focused and on task at school and to help them build positive relationships with peers and teachers so that they have someone to rely on at school and feel more positive towards their learning. Finally, children with attention difficulties in school may especially benefit from certain instructional practices. In particular, making activities that are interactive and allowing for some flexibility may help these children to adapt to the demands of the classroom. These students may have trouble focusing for a long period of time and may need to shift between two activities to keep their focus. Allowing these students to have small breaks or a shift in activities may be particularly helpful to increase intellectual engagement for these students. So overall, intellectual engagement is a very complex idea linked to many student outcomes and many family, child, and school factors. But that being said, there are many ways to help improve intellectual engagement, and that's what our focus is here today. Up next, we're going to talk about how the Tell Them For Me survey can be used to monitor and track student intellectual engagement for your schools. But first, I'm going to address a few questions that came up during this presentation. So the first question was concerning students that are ESL or perhaps from another culture, and if being an ESL student or a student from another culture could impact their student levels of engagement. Culture can most certainly impact student engagement. When we consider how schools and classrooms are set up in Canada as compared to other countries in the world, there are very dramatic differences. For instance, in Canadian schools, children are often encouraged to participate, raise their hands, volunteer, speak up in class. They're encouraged to have a really active role in the classroom and to actively engage. In comparison, schools in some Asian cultures, such as in India and in China, the classrooms are so large with so many students, sometimes up to 50 students in a classroom, that students are not actually encouraged to actively participate, but they're encouraged to passively engage through being quiet listeners and being very keen observers. So it's possible that if you have children or adolescents in your class that are from other cultures, they may not be used to the Canadian demands of the classroom. They may be more used to having a passive form of engagement rather than active. And this may also be true for students that are ESL. They may be in the process of transitioning and learning what's typical in Canadian classrooms. So it most certainly does play a role. A second question that came up was concerning hyperactive students. Although we need to provide some flexibility with these students, is it okay to just let them wander around the classroom and do their own thing? My answer is it really depends on what is happening in the classroom at the time and what grade level we're really trying to focus on here. Certainly younger students with attentional problems, they may have trouble sitting still for a long period of time, and they may need to just go off into a quiet corner or, read a book in the corner or sort materials. Older students may have more ability to sit still and just may need to shift between two different activities. So giving them two tasks at once and they can go back and forth between, or providing them with quiet alternatives that help them at their desk is also possible. Another great strategy for students with attention problems is to help them by letting them help you. So giving them the busy work around the classroom, helping them to sort your supplies and set up your lab equipment, or do anything that they can take a break from their academic tasks and help you with the busy work is just a nice cognitive break for them, and it keeps them doing something functional and not too distracting to the other students. A third question we had was, how can you really know if your students are being engaged? This is a bit complicated, and I did refer to a few behavior techniques that we can see and markers that we can see, such as they have their heads up and they're working steadily. But those are behaviors. How can we really know if students are thinking about what they're doing in school and putting lots of psychological effort into their tasks? The truth is, we have to ask them. As teachers, you have to know your students and know if they are trying. As administrators and principals, we have to connect with the teachers and visit the classrooms and get a sense, are they enthusiastic? Are they motivated? Do they really care about what they're doing? It's really hard to just take a quick snapshot and see if this is what's going on without asking them in person. Thanks so much for the presentation and for the questions, and now we'll be moving on to the next segment of the Raising the Bar series.
Good day, everyone. Once again, my name is Stephanie Robinson with the Learning Bar, and I will be sharing how you can utilize our Tell Them For Me reporting features to track intellectual engagement in your schools. The topic of intellectual engagement comes from our domain of engagement outcomes and is comprised of 3 measures: interest and motivation, which asks students about their interest and motivation in their classes; effort, which asks students about their effort in their classes; and finally, skills challenge, which asks students about how challenged and skilled they are in their classes. For each of the 3 measures, students are asked a series of questions based on their core subjects. At the elementary level, these subjects are language arts and math, and at the secondary level, these subjects are language arts, math, and science. On the other side of surveying, once your student surveys have closed and reports are available, intellectual engagement results are reported as a percentage of students who are intellectually engaged, students who are trying hard to succeed, and in regards to skills challenge, students are placed into 4 categories depending on their level of skills and challenge. To give you some more context on what this means to you as educators, I will be going over some specific examples in the next set of slides. Please keep in mind that any data you may see comes from our demo district, so it is not any particular school or district's data. We will start by taking a closer look at our measure on effort using our one-click report. To remind you all, our one-click report reports all survey results by measure. Using the example provided here, at the click of a button, I can quickly see that my students are just slightly below the Canadian norm in regards to trying hard to succeed. The Canadian norm should be used as a benchmark and is not something I should necessarily be striving for, but does suggest I am on par with other Canadian schools. The text to the left of the chart suggests that my male students are not trying as hard to succeed as my female students. By making this observation, I know that this is something I may need to focus on in terms of school improvement. I've used our interactive charts to give you an example of how you can identify areas of concern in regards to students transitioning between elementary, middle, and high school. Within the interactive charts, I have applied our drill down feature to further break down my result on students who are interested and motivated by grade, and also have applied the Canadian norm and replica line. You can quickly and easily see that there is a variance between grades 6 and 7 when students are generally transitioning from elementary to middle school or junior high. In regards to the transitions from grade 8 to grade 9, you can see a change as well, and that students don't really seem to be interested and motivated until grade 12, when many students are in the process of making important post-secondary education decisions. By utilizing the interactive chart drill down feature, I can easily pinpoint these areas and apply interventions as necessary. Looking at our measure on skills challenge, students are placed into one of 4 groupings based on the combination of their skills and how challenging they feel their learning tasks are. Low skills, low challenge, students in this group are likely to feel apathetic. These students may feel indifferent to learning tasks because they have low skill and are asked to perform learning tasks that are low in challenge. Low skills, high challenge, students in this grouping are likely to feel anxious. These students may feel this way as they have low skill and are asked to perform learning tasks that are high in challenge. High skill, low challenge, students in this grouping are likely to feel bored. These students may feel bored as the learning tasks they are given are not challenging enough given their high skill level. And finally, high skills, high challenge. Students in this ideal grouping are likely to experience what we refer to as flow. These students are likely to feel that the learning tasks they are given meets their skill level. You can use this chart to identify how your students are grouped and then apply appropriate improvement planning in order to move the majority of students into the flow category. The Thematic Report on Student Engagement is a wonderful tool that can be shared with your stakeholders and focuses on all three areas of engagement: institutional, intellectual, and social. It is comprised of a research component and pulls data directly from your results. Use this report to gain insight into the full scope of engagement at your school. This report also provides strategies that schools can adopt to increase engagement amongst their students. With all our measures, not just the measures of intellectual engagement, the key is to regularly survey your students in order to gain insight into which areas you should be celebrating, as well as identifying the areas in which you need to adjust. Our first suggestion would be to adopt the notion of completing 2 snapshots within a school year. That is to say, you can survey your students in the fall, analyze your data, and apply the results to your school improvement planning. Then, in the spring, survey your students again using a subset of identified measures to see which interventions were successful and which areas still need work. Increases of intellectual engagement may need a longer time frame to see growth. You can apply our year-over-year comparison to this measure. This is a function you can perform in our interactive charts. You can compare up to 3 years' worth of data, so long as you continually choose to survey on the same measure. By applying this comparison, you can see how your school has improved over several years, which is terrific for a longer-term improvement plan. You can also use this feature to track changes with a specific cohort in your school. These are just a few examples of how you can use the Tell Them For Me reporting tools to track your school's intellectual engagement levels. We do encourage you utilize our reports so that you can too see the story your students are telling you. Further to this, the Account Success Management team at the Learning Bar does offer debriefing sessions which provides more detailed support in examining your data. If this is a service you are interested in, please connect with your Account Success Manager. Now I will be answering a few questions that were asked during our live webinar. The first question is, how much of Tell Them For Me could reasonably be shared with teachers as opposed to administrators? We at the Learning Bar suggest that you share your results with 3 main stakeholder groups: staff, students, and parents. The more involved these groups are with the results, the more excitement will grow for the survey, and the more uptake you will have, which will result in high response rates from survey takers and more meaningful results. Sharing with staff is key, as they are the ones who help make surveying possible. Share results with staff so they can incorporate their thoughts and suggestions into school improvement planning. In regards to your students, what better way for students to know that their voices have been heard than by sharing the results and school improvements based off those results with them? And finally, parents will want to know how the results have impacted the school and with their children. We have terrific resources and ideas on how to share your results available on the Access Resources section of www.tellthemforme.com. Please contact our Help Desk team or your Account Success Manager for assistance. The second question was, are there help files to help me use the year-over-year feature? This feature is explained during report feature training webinars, and we have report training webinar recordings available on the Access Resources section of www.tellthemforme.com. These resources will explain what the year-over-year comparison line is and how to apply it to your data. Please contact our Help Desk team or your Account Success Manager for assistance. Next up, Tell Them For Me member Olga Grigoriev will be discussing how her school raised their levels of intellectual engagement using the Tell Them For Me student survey.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Olga Grigoriev, and I'm the past principal of Rockland District High School, and the results that you're seeing up on the screen right now are from Rockland District High School. I have to apologize in advance. I've got quite a cold, and so my voice might not be great to hear or to listen to, but I'll do my best. And it's not a scripted presentation, as you've heard. It really is more kind of walking through the experiences that we had at Rockland District High School over that time. Now, I was there as a principal for 3 years, and the results that you're seeing on the screen are from my last year there. We did use the Tell Them From Me survey throughout that entire 3-year period, but this is the period of time that seemed to show the most progress in this particular area, so that's why I've chosen to put that out for you in a graph. So you see that we did measure the results twice in the year. Normally in previous years we had done a fall measurement and then followed with a spring measurement, but this time around we chose February and July. Really, July is more like the end of June. So in terms of the progress that you've seen, it does look to be quite significant in the areas of instructional motivation and in effort and in quality instruction. And just like any other source of data, you would love to be able to make a really direct and easy link back to what accounted for this change, and I have to tell you that it's not that easy to be able to give you an answer to that. But I am going to switch to the next slide. Tell Them From Me really is one data source, and as you know, any of you that have done research, you really want to triangulate that with all kinds of other data sources. And often what we found is the Tell Them From Me can pinpoint specific areas then that you want to delve into more broadly and in different ways. So I think a question came up earlier: how can you tell if your students are engaged? Well, a great way, as leaders that are online understand, is that you have to get into the classroom and actually observe what they're doing. And they might tell you that they're engaged, but you actually have to see evidence of that. So lots and lots of classroom visits during that time, lots of conversations with students, to ask them, what are you working on in school? What's the lesson about? Can you tell me what your role is? Do you understand what you're learning? And then follow-ups with more classroom visits, and also conversations with the teachers following those visits. So professional dialogue, lots of it one-on-one with teachers, and also in any kind of team situation that you're having, and staff meetings for sure, and in your student success team meetings. And I have already mentioned the one-on-ones that you'd be doing with students both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And you know, as principals, that students can tell you a lot about what's going on in the classroom in a good way, and sometimes with some of the frustrations that they're feeling as well. So what we were working on at Rockland District over that period of time, and certainly during the year where the data is showing a change, is a real shift in school culture. It was a real focus on a culture that was based around teacher needs as opposed to student needs. So we were shifting the culture to a student-centered approach. And again, lots of conversations, lots of understanding about why that would be important to do, and also to a mindset of growth as opposed to slotting students into certain areas or certain expectations around them. Shifting some of the language that took place in our conversations around students and about what their capacities were and what their destiny and their pathways might be. And again, going back to why we saw the improvement, all kinds of reasons why I think, and I can't tell you for sure which one of these was the ticket, but looking at school effectiveness indicators, strong focus on assessment and collaborative instructional leadership, and certainly the teaching and learning environment. And to be more specific, I can explain some of the areas that we focused on. So looking at gaps in student achievement data and disaggregating what that looks like, and setting some really specific goals and targets for our students. Also making sure that the tasks that we presented to students were really meaningful in their activities and that they fostered a lot of thinking and learning on the part of students. Collaborative inquiry took place a lot in the school, co-planning of lessons, lesson study with teachers and with principals involved in the process. we employed the strategy of hubs and co-planning our curriculum instruction. We looked at different opportunities for students to be able to demonstrate their learning, so focus on differentiated assessments and differentiated tasks. We looked at common development of assessment tools. Across departments, our math department took a real lead in it and then helped the rest of the school continue with the process. We also looked at fair and equitable assessment and evaluation policy that we communicated to the school community and also to the parent community and our school councils. So students knew what the expectations were be able to articulate it to the teacher, to each other. And also when it came down to looking at the assessment, it was very much around expectations as opposed to tasks. And those expectation-based assessments helped us with our credit rescue and helping dialogue with students as to what they were missing. So really clear expectations for them on what the curriculum was and what they had to do to be successful. Comments on report cards, we talked about making them really personalized and clear, and comments that would reflect individual progress that students were showing. Working to align our practices across the school as well so that it was consistent with our provincial assessment framework. So we talked about the communication of those protocols and various publications that we had going home to parents and within classrooms, and students and parents were very clear about what they were. Now we talked about school improvement planning in a collaborative setting. And it was inclusive to our teachers and to our educational assistants. We included our custodians as well and included our parents in defining and understanding what was expected. So our school improvement teams were actively involved. And that points to the collaborative learning culture and very frequent meetings with our teams, our student success teams, and talking about students who weren't doing well, weren't achieving well, and what are the kinds of opportunities that we could create for them to be engaged. We did talk about engaging courses and started to offer courses that were more based on the interests of the students and the needs of the students, and tried to take the traditional courses that we were offering and do them in a little bit in a different manner to make them more authentic learning experiences for the students. Just watching the time here. I think I mentioned a differentiated approach to instruction and to assessment, and really challenging the types of tasks that we were offering, and going out into the community, having the community come in, doing some entrepreneurial activities in our co-op, for example. And yeah, I say that would summarize the bulk of many of the initiatives that we were taking on at the time. So at this time, I guess I'll wait to see if there are any specific questions.
If anyone has any questions, you can please send them through, and I will read them out loud to our guest presenter. First question, what methods of assessment were most successful for you?
Okay, it would really depend on the course that we were talking about. We looked at courses that were open, so this is a high school situation I'm addressing. So courses that were of an open nature where you would have a broad range of students in your classroom. We looked at giving students some choice in the types of assessments that they wanted to have employed. So looking at a choice board, and to some extent, and they weren't always differentiated, definitely, but where students had some input into the type of assessment that would be used in collaboration with them, we found more success with those.
And I do have another question. How did you get staff to buy into such sweeping change?
Okay, I would say it wasn't easy, and it was a process over time. The first step in the first year, and this really speaks more to leadership, was for staff to understand the vision, and I should say that's not always an easy task. So over time, building trust, building understanding with staff, and doing the work alongside of staff. So as a principal, you really need to get into the classrooms and to do some of the co-planning of the lessons yourself, to make yourself vulnerable, to try and teach some of those lessons in a way that you're expecting your teachers to be doing it, and to model some of the change that you're asking for in the building.
I have one more question. Can you give me an example of how you might have taken a bit of data from TTFM and then developed steps to support students?
Okay, so in terms of general, a very specific example that keeps coming to my mind was when we looked at disaggregating the data by grade, and we found that one of our grades, I think it was the grade 10 group in particular, during one of the years, we found that there was a greater incidence of some school climate issues within that grade. So then what we were able to do was to hone in on that particular grade with different presentations, different discussions, different focus groups, and really the data that we saw in Tell Them For Me confirmed what we had already seen in the office referrals and the conversations between staff members. So it was kind of reaffirming for us to see that what we implicitly believed what was happening actually was happening through the data. And so it helped us focus on a target group that we needed to do more work with.
One more question. What strategies were used for students that did not submit required assignments?
We used very much a progressive approach with that. The expectation was that they would submit the assignment. So we set up a climate and opportunities for them to do so. So sometimes it was through progressive discipline. We tried to frame it in a positive manner, so it was an opportunity for them to get caught up. So we did give them multiple opportunities and give them supports that they needed. So first exploring why was it that they weren't submitting the assignments. Was it because they didn't understand the task? Is it because they needed greater support? Did it need to be rewritten in a different way? Was it not engaging for them? So we worked out all of those, and then when it came down to their own accountability to get the job done, we provided them the opportunities, whether that was through some lunchtime support, sometimes after school support at home, or sometimes even having them work with our student success team to get the job done.
And one final question. We have just started using Tell Them For Me, and it sounds like you value this as a tool. How do you communicate to students the results?
That's a really great question, and I think a previous speaker did mention the value of sharing your results with your school community, and particularly with the students. When you're giving students voice and you're saying to them that their opinion means something to you, it's really important to give that back. So a really concrete and practical way to do that is if they've shared something with you in the open-ended questions, and it could be something that in your mind might be a small thing, like they talk about, oh, they need a microwave down in the cafeteria, or they'd really like to see another club formed in your school. Then by showing them that you've listened to them and showing them with concrete examples of your response to them, like providing an additional microwave or providing that additional club, they quickly see that there's a point to having given the feedback. It does take a little bit of their time to do it. So it's that being able to be reflected in the survey, and we actually at one point in time we did develop some of the open-ended questions in collaboration with our student council, because we wanted to look at specific areas of concern to them in our school, and it had to do with some transitioning. So with them, in collaboration with them and with our student council and school council, our parent council, the questions that they had come up with were put into our open-ended questions, and they were very appreciative of that, and we did share the results with them broadly throughout the school.
In closing, I would like to take a moment to thank my co-presenters, Dr. Kathleen Hughes and Olga Grigoriev. If you have any questions in regards to the content of this webinar, please send your inquiry to webinar@thelearningbar.com with the subject line of Raising the Bar. Thank you very much for tuning in.